If you have blood sugar problems and want to eat bread, then you're in a world of trouble. The main reason for this is that the majority of breads and crackers contain too much carbohydrates and sugars and too little dietary fibers to compensate for this. However, there are exceptions to the rule and there are options out there to eat if you have blood sugar problems and type 2 diabetes. I'm Ali from illnessfreelife.com, and in this video you'll learn 8 healthy breads and bread replacements if you have blood sugar problems and type 2 diabetes. Like I said in the introduction of this video, the main reason why the majority of breads are unhealthy is because they contain too much carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight and too little dietary fibers to compensate for this. You need the dietary fibers in carb sources or sugar sources to lower the amount of carbohydrates and sugars you absorb from this product, and the dietary fibers slow down the rate with which the absorption happens. So in total, you'll absorb less carbohydrates and sugars in total and at a slower pace, and this means that your pancreas can keep up with the insulin demand that is needed. And also it will have the luxury of only producing small amounts of insulin to absorb the not so much carbohydrates and sugars you're absorbing. All in all, if you eat breads or crackers, you want to aim for products that contain not a lot of carbohydrates and sugars, ideally, and as much dietary fibers as possible. The problem, however, is that the assortment in supermarkets or grocery stores isn't that great when it comes to the combination of not a lot of carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight and a lot of dietary fibers per unit of weight. And because most people know that regular bread isn't that healthy, they try to find better options by choosing the exotic sounding products in supermarkets. But rarely are these products healthy. Think, for example, of spelt bread or multigrain bread or bread made from ancient grains. Although this all sounds special and healthy, it really isn't, because if we look at the nutritional value of these breads, they are often worse than whole wheat bread, and whole wheat bread isn't great to start with. If you want to learn more about this subject, I've made a video about it in the past. Click here if you want to see that video. Link of that video is also in the description of this video. The list we compiled in this video is based on nutritional information we can find online. But of course, if we advise a certain bread, the nutritional values can vary from the United States to the UK to Australia. But in general, the things we'll advise in this video should be similar all around the world. Yes, there will be some fluctuation in the nutritional value, but in general, again, they should be the same as the things we say in this video. If they differ too much, and by that I mean too much on the wrong side of the equation, then you of course should avoid that product. But for now, I'll give you the 8 best and healthiest bread and bread replacements if you have blood sugar problems and type 2 diabetes. Option 1, low carb bread. When it comes to bread, low carb bread is by far the best option you could choose. And the good thing is that I haven't found a bread that labels itself as low carb bread that wasn't low carb bread. All the breads I found that are labeled or sold as low carb bread are actually low carb. They contain little or way less carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight compared to whole wheat bread, for example, and typically way more dietary fibers per unit of weight. The ratio is often 1:1. For example, average low carb bread contains around 15% carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight and around 15% dietary fibers per unit of weight. Products that tend to contain a 1:1 ratio of carbohydrates and sugars to dietary fibers tend to be super healthy, and low carb bread is no exception. So if you want to consider eating bread if you have blood sugar problems or type 2 diabetes, low carb bread is by far the best thing you could choose. Option 2, protein bread. Protein bread is a sibling of low carb bread. It's also made from seeds and grains that are low carb and high in dietary fibers, but what makes protein bread often different is that they add an extra protein source to the bread. This of course is good for several reasons. First of all, proteins satiate us a lot, so you don't have to eat a lot of the bread to become full. Second, proteins have little to no influence on your blood sugar, especially if you compare it with carbohydrates and sugars. So if you have bread that contains more protein and less carbohydrates and sugars, that's always a good trade-off. If you look or find protein-rich bread or bread with added protein, it tends to be a bread that is made for the health-conscious consumer, and you'll find a combination of factors that are ideal. It tends to contain lower carbohydrates and sugars than, for example, whole wheat bread, which is good. It tends to contain more protein, which is good, and it tends to contain more dietary fibers, which is good. All in all, you'll get a product that is somewhat in between low-carb bread and rye bread. It can be a bit denser than regular low-carb bread, but it's not as sour as rye bread, for example. And again, when it comes to protein-rich bread or protein bread, I haven't found an exception to the rule that it's unhealthy. All the options I found were healthy, meaning they had lower carbohydrates and sugars compared to whole wheat bread, and more dietary fibers and more proteins. Option 3, rye bread. Rye bread is often also a good choice if you want to eat bread and want to replace your regular white bread or whole wheat bread with a healthier option. Rye bread tends to contain less carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight than whole wheat bread, for example, and it also tends to contain more dietary fibers per unit of weight. When it comes to rye bread, the nutritional value can differ from country to country and type to type, so always try to find the one that contains as little carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight as possible, and at the same time as much dietary fibers per unit of weight as possible. But in general, rye bread tends to be a better option than whole wheat bread, and definitely always a better option than white bread. It rarely is a better option than, for example, low carb bread, but it's definitely not that unhealthy if you even find a borderline option. All in all, if rye bread is something you like and is maybe the only option you have, then it will be often better than whole wheat bread. Quick, before we continue with the list, do you like this video and want to receive more of these videos? Don't forget to give us a like and subscribe for free to this YouTube channel. That way you'll never miss a video we publish, and you'll help us reach more people to help them with their blood sugar problems and to reverse their type 2 diabetes. And now back to the rest of the video. Option 4, oatmeal bread. If you're lucky, you should or could find bread that is predominantly made from oatmeal. And although oatmeal does contain a lot of carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight, somewhere around 65%, it also contains a decent amount of dietary fibers, making it a good base to make bread from. Now, you won't find this option in a lot of grocery stores and supermarkets, and you tend to only find it in developed Western countries with a wide range of options in the supermarket. Now, bread from oatmeal tends to not be a lot better than whole wheat bread, for example, but it is somewhat similar, often a little bit better, but it's something you could consider to eat from time to time if you want to change things up a little bit. But again, it's not the best option from this list. It's definitely not unhealthy, but it's one of the options you could consider, like I said, to change it up from time to time, or to even make it yourself from oatmeal. If you just Google bread made from oatmeal or oatmeal bread, you'll find a lot of recipes you could consider making that will give you a bread that, yes, is high in carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight, but if you use the right type of oatmeal, it will also contain a lot of dietary fibers per unit of weight, giving you a product that is different from whole wheat bread, for example, and something you can eat from time to time to change it up a little bit. Option 5, fiber-rich or low-carb crackers. Although this isn't bread, of course, it's also something you could use as a bread replacement. Low-carb crackers or fiber-rich crackers are crackers that are low-carb or fiber-rich, and often both. There are many ways to make them. You could, for example, make them with whole wheat flour and then add dietary fiber to them, for example, psyllium husk. This gives you a fiber-rich cracker. But you could also make them from alternative flours such as soy flour or pea flour or chickpea flour or whatever type of flour that is low carb, low sugar, and at the same time high or higher in dietary fibers. When it comes to low carb crackers or fiber rich crackers, I haven't found a product that labels itself as fiber rich cracker or low carb cracker, and that wasn't what the label said. So you should be okay, but it's never a wrong idea to compare the cracker you found that labels itself as fiber-rich or low-carb with regular whole wheat crackers, for example. And when you compare the two, you should find that the healthier option does contain less carbohydrates and sugars and does contain more dietary fibers per unit of weight compared to the whole wheat cracker option. This is also something you will only find in somewhat developed countries, but this differs from country to country, and online you can often find way more options than in grocery stores, regardless of what country you live in. Option 6, flaxseed crackers. Crackers made from flaxseed tend to be super healthy for us because flaxseed doesn't contain a lot of carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight and does contain a lot of dietary fibers per unit of weight. When you Google these crackers or find these crackers, you should find a 1-to-1 ratio or closely to that of carbohydrates and sugars and dietary fibers. And like I said in the beginning of this video, if you find products that contain a 1-to-1 ratio or something close to that, then you found a product that is super healthy to eat if you have blood sugar problems and type 2 diabetes. And the average flaxseed cracker has somewhat of a similar composition. You should always watch out for the crackers that contain a portion of flaxseed flour or flaxseed in of itself, but the base flour is, for example, just whole wheat flour. Real flaxseed crackers contain a lot of flaxseed and use flaxseed flour as a base, and this should be represented in the nutritional value. You should find crackers that contain somewhere between 15 to 20% carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight and around 15 to 20% dietary fibers per unit of weight. If you find something that contains way more carbohydrates and sugars and way less dietary fibers, then you've probably found one that isn't that great. Option 7, cheese crackers. Cheese crackers are crackers that use actual real cheese in the batter to make the cracker more low carb and more fat rich and more protein rich, giving you a product that is definitely healthier than regular whole wheat crackers. Now, this differs from country to country because some countries, for example the United States, often just uses powder that is artificial cheese flavor and label the crackers as cheese crackers, and they don't use real cheese. Because again, if it's an healthy option, you will often find that it's made from whole wheat flour with a mixture of seeds, for example, and the real cheese, giving you a product that contains less carbohydrates and sugars than regular whole wheat crackers and the same or a little bit more dietary fibers per unit of weight than regular whole wheat crackers. You should find a product that contains around maybe 40% carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight and somewhere between 10 to 15% dietary fibers per unit of weight. And the product should look healthy. If it looks super artificial with maybe a Cheetos orange glow on it, then they haven't used real cheese, but like cheese powder or some synthetic cheese flavored powder. Use common sense when you find something that is called a cheese cracker and ask yourself if it's really healthy. And like I said, always compare it to regular whole wheat crackers. Do you see that it contains less carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight? Does it really contain more dietary fibers per unit of weight and protein and fat? Then you know it's a real cheese cracker that uses actual cheese. Option 8, make your own low-carb bread or crackers. One of the best ways to control your own diet is by making your own products, whatever products those are. And because finding bread alternatives and cracker alternatives can be somewhat hard, it's also a good option to start making your own breads and crackers. Now, you might wonder, where can I find these healthy recipes? Well, you're fortunate because on our website, illnessfreelife.com, you can find a free recipe for a healthy bread and for healthy crackers. Both are super low carb and higher in dietary fibers, proteins, and healthy fats, giving you a bread and a cracker that are definitely healthy and also products you should never worry about composition-wise. Now, to find these free recipes, you only have to follow the links in the description of this video. And if you're on our website anyway, don't forget to subscribe for free to our Diabetes Free Secret. This is a small document we give away in which we teach you what the main causes of blood sugar problems and type 2 diabetes are and what you can do to prevent, improve, and fully reverse these problems with a healthy diet. For now, this was the video about healthy bread options and healthy bread replacement options. If you have any questions about this video, please leave a comment down below. Don't forget to download the free recipes following the links in the description, and I'll see you in the next video.